What's going on, everybody? Gunnar here, and this is an idea fly, okay? First and foremost, it's an idea fly. I actually came up with this today on the way back from the post office. I'm going to show you how to tie it really quick. The end of this video is all going to be about some influences, the design, how it swims, a little funny story to go with that. So stick around for that, because that's the important stuff. But before I kind of dig into that, I want to get the pattern kind of tied and over with. So that you guys understand how it's built and what's going on, because there's a lot of kind of hidden tricks and layers to this that affect exactly what's going on. So first and foremost, 2/0 Ahrex 26-degree bent streamer hook. Really awesome hook. Basically we're tying a wedge head, but we're going to do it with the dubbing epoxy jerk style heads. That way you can kind of get away with not having to do deer hair work. It's a little bit easier, more consistent, and the coolest thing about this fly is it has a hidden Flymen Fishing Company double barrel popper body that we're going to put in backwards, which is kind of the slider position. So I'll show you that when we get to that. What I'm currently doing, obviously I put down a little thread base, building a little thread bump in the back and a little thread bump just in front of that, maybe a hook eye in front of that, and I'm going to split the difference with a 1/2 hitch. And I'm going to come in with some Flymen Fishing Company Faux Bucktail. Now the Faux Bucktail is kind of important because it's going to get us the length we need. I'm going to use this at about 5 inches. That's kind of hard to find natural bucktail that long consistently, and I don't want this to flare. And what it's going to do is it's going to be nice and stiff enough to not foul, and it's going to be our flash-a-boo support. We're going to come in with some polar flash as our tailing flash material. I'm going to put maybe 1 inch of taper into this. I'm not too worried about it. Again, we're only coming in maybe 5. I want 5 inches or so. Trim all this off. And I'm going to do this with kind of like 2 loose wraps. I guess that was 3. Kind of doing this the way I do in like normal bucktail, right? And I'm going to spin that around kind of the sides and towards the bottom. And then I'm going to add some tension to that. Walk around, see if I like it. Move that little section back up top. Then I'm going to put some good thread pressure on that and walk that back towards that back bump, which will give it just a little bit of flare. I'm going to kind of close that down a little bit. I want that pretty straight back. And that's it. That's our tail. Now just for durability, I'm going to tag this with super glue. So don't mind that. The coolest thing about this fly, so I swam this fly today. Here's the funny story. I'm going to tell you right now because I already started it. And I'm going to come in with polar flash. I'm going to, let me see before I start my story. It's at full length. I just cut this off the hank at full length. I'm going to put a slight taper in and tie it in 50-50, my side and your side. So I'm going to tie it in on my side, draw it through the hook, and then tie it in on your side, distribute it a little bit with my fingers so that it's nice and even. So the story. I really wanted to film this fly in the water because I think it's a really odd kind of concept that people aren't gonna get right away, and the first question is gonna be like, well, what's it swim? Like, how's it swim? What's it look like, right? That's what you want to know. And I get that, and I wanted to film it. And so tonight my wife and I, we were out on top of the hill here in Duluth doing something for her car, and I was like, you know, I'm gonna run to the river, I'm gonna bring the camera, I'm gonna film this so I can kind of put a little clip together for people to see. And I took it out, and I got my camera out, and I got my mic out, and I got my tripod out, and I flipped the LCD screen around, and I turn on the camera, and it reads no SD card present. So basically I just wasted an hour of my life driving back and forth to the river trying to film a video when I didn't have my SD card of a camera. So when I tell you how this bug swims, and hopefully you kind of hear how excited I am about it, because it's really cool. But I'm just going to tell you how it swims, and you're going to have to take my word for it. Okay, so we got our polar flash tied in. I'm going to come in, and what we're doing is basically doing a super jerk body or jerk junior body. And so I have an EP craft fur brush in white chartreuse and an EP sparkle brush in holographic silver. And we're going to tie these in at the same time at the same place, and we're going to palmer these simultaneously up the body just short of kind of the bend and that 26-degree bent streamer hook. So the fly, the coolest thing, you guys just count how many wraps I do if you want to kind of get an idea of how dense to put this, because that's, the density is kind of important, I suppose. But I'm going to talk while I do this so you guys can count wraps if you want. But the fly, the coolest thing about the fly is the fly's buoyant / neutrally buoyant. It's kind of in between. You know, it doesn't like float back to the surface like immediately. It has a really slow, neutral buoyant kind of rise and hover to it, which I think is super sexy for fishing smallmouth trout. Any predator, basically under any condition. I love a fly that is neutrally buoyant and has even a slow rise to it. And you get almost the kind of D&D, drunken and disorderly Sid, even like a swimmy Jimmy wobble to the fly with the dubbing wedge head paired with the slider body on top of there. But the coolest thing to me is because it's kind of on that neutral buoyant zone, and the bent hook really draws that, the initial draw is down and it catches the lip of the slider body, and so you can fish a subsurface buoyant fly like almost, you know, kind of drunken and disorderly style on a floating line. That's what I was using tonight. And I think that's really cool because I've recently, you know, I've done, well, you guys don't know this, but I have about half a dozen swing patterns I'm currently working on that are all weighted. And I have, you know, eye candies and stuff like that. And I'm starting to get into this kind of like jig fly floating line mentality for whatever reason, just experimenting with stuff. And the thought of being able to switch up and fish, you know, a weightless fly that's going to suspend on a floating line because it's a diver, but it's in that neutral buoyant zone, it was really exciting to me. So that was really cool. And again, we'll talk more about the action at the end of this. So I got that walked up. I'm going to come in now. This is a size small Flymen Fishing Company double barrel popperhead, and I'm going to put it on backwards, which I'm going to call a slider. It's in the slider orientation, and this is going to serve quite a few purposes. First and foremost, I guess second and foremost, I already used that phrase. I poked a hole through this. This is a Zud bubbler rubber leg puller or something like that. You can find this at quite a few fly shops. It's a really nice wide gauge needle. You heat it up with a lighter and you push it through to melt the foam away from the inside. And one of the biggest things that's going to help you is take a pair of scissors, like some Dr. Slicks or something, and just open up the hole you just made by ramming your scissors in there and spinning it. And so I'm going to slip that over the hook eye up onto the flat part of the bend. Now I want this almost completely, completely flat and level on here. So I'm gonna put my gel super glue kind of way up top here so it doesn't cure too soon, because that's what happened the first time I did this. So you got to do this kind of in an aggressive, fast motion and really get that up there. And so what this does, so this is obviously buoyant, and because of the way we put our needle through, you have more buoyancy on top than on bottom. So it's already going to help the keel. Obviously this is a nice thick wire hook. It's got a big keel. It's a 2/0 hook, and this is going to stabilize this in this flat position, which we're also going to help stabilize with our dubbing head. And what this slider, the shape of the slider, this concavity right here, that wants to dive on its own, but when it's at the eye of the hook, it's almost not aggressive enough to suck it under with a floating line. It almost needs a little bit of weight up there. And so having the dubbing head on a bent streamer hook, it's magic. It is, I don't know how else to describe it. I am so excited to fish this bug come springtime. It's going to be dynamite. So this is a little tricky to do, and it's kind of hard to wrap your head around stacking a fly sideways, but this is now going to be top and this is now going to be bottom. I'm going to do gray over white. In the material, I initially wanted to do craft fur, but craft fur is a little too soft, and it almost works, but it doesn't work. And what happens is the popper body pushes so much water that if you use craft fur in between strips, so every time you have that momentary slack pause in between strips, that craft fur almost retracts on itself, and it doesn't hold the profile that you need to create the baitfish silhouette on a diver. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in. This is MicroLon, which is a Hedron ink product, MicroLon in gray, and we're going to do white on the bottom. Full length off the hank, cut in half. And I'm going to put a slight taper into that, and I'm going to tie it in about 60-40 on top, 50-50 on the bottom. And this is going to be our kind of magic wing support here. I had a little too many fibers there. And what we're going to do is you use, this is kind of exciting to me, but you use the popper head as a material dam, right? So that was, this originally, I think I might have mentioned earlier, it kind of came from a kite fly idea. Maybe I didn't. I'll retell the story later. But yeah, I forget what I was saying. Material dams. So what I've done in the past, and you guys, I don't know if I've shared these ideas with you guys yet, but I've swapped out basically the slider bodies and stuff like this probably a dozen times or so over the course of a year. For material dam systems basically, and I'll swap it out for like 1/4 inch body tubing, 1/8 inch body tubing. If you go way back to my old Vimeo channel, I have a fly called the Salsa Verde, and on that I got like a Rainey's popper inside of that fly. So I've used poppers quite a few times as material dam systems to flare material like this and to create kind of buoyancy and stabilization in a fly. So this isn't really new for me. I also did it, wow. I had a fly called the Tentacles, which was supposed to imitate tube flies, or tube jigs for smallmouth in the gear world. And that was a pretty cool fly that had a Rainey's popper body in it. And I just got blood all over this fly. I ripped my finger open on that hook, which is sweet. That's a nice sharp hook, Ahrex. Good job, boys. But, so I got this, I am bleeding everywhere. We might have to take a break, people. Getting blood all over my nice new fly. It's scented. Scented flies cost extra, people. Take my word for it. Dang. That's a deep gouge. So we got MicroLon top and bottom. Again, the top 60-40, the bottom's 50-50. That way we kind of build just a little bit of a kind of silhouette to that. And the dubbing, this is all kind of crazy right now if you can see that, but the dubbing's going to hold that back in position, so that's nothing to worry about. I'm going to change the dubbing color on top. And what I did is I took Senyos laser dub and I blended it with Senyos fusion dub. I'll get the color of the fusion dub. The laser dub was silver minnow belly and the fusion dub is Smurf. And I'm just going for a little bit more of a gray shad kind of thing. But I'm going to tie this in the 30-70 way that's kind of on conmen and imposters to build our head here. Make sure that's split the gap 50-50. Use some shank to tie that down because we have quite a bit of dubbing. And then the bottom's just straight white. Cool, and then you kind of come up, you split your dubbing, you tag that hook eye, and then we're just going to finger whip. And comb all this out. So again, we're building this neutrally buoyant diver. It's the diver. Basically, it's a diver, but we have a dubbing head on a bent streamer hook with a bait. So I don't know. So every time I think about divers and poppers and stuff, the silhouette it always bothers me. It's always bothered me. The silhouette is always kind of like tadpole-ish and froggish, and I've never been able to truly create kind of a baitfish diver. And this idea of using the bent streamer hook paired with that double barrel popper on the flat shank of the hook, it creates the perfect silhouette for a baitfish diver. So I'm going to come in using, this is the same as every jerk head. I am going to use a 6mm eye, which is a little bit small. I might scale that up to an 8.5 after I've fished this a couple times and see which one's more aggressive. But I really like the way the original came out with the 6mm eyes. These are Deer Creek eyes, and I'm just going to use tear mender. So if you've seen this before, you've seen this and you know what's going on, but basically I'm going to saturate this dubbing, make a mess, of course. And rest that eye right into place. It's a little tricky to get these eyes to stay on here. You're going to have to take some time because that tear mender takes a second to set up, and because, well, there's just a lot of material in there with the MicroLon and the dubbing, so it takes a second to cure and to set it in the proper placement, but it's worth the wait. And I think it's worth using the tear mender for the durability over the instant satisfaction of kind of a gel super glue. So I'm going to hit this with some, what are those called? Tweezers. I'm going to hit this with some tweezers, let these eyes set up in place, and then I'll talk to you guys while that sets up about how the fly swims and behaves in the water, because this thing, I don't know if I've ever been this excited to fish a fly come springtime. It's going to be, warm water opener is in like 3 weeks, and so I am super distracted right now with orders and trying to do ideas, and I got like a dozen patterns I have in my head right now. So okay dudes, so this is, oh, I forget the name I came up with. It was a really funny name. Okay, the name. So the name is it this thing, that thing, this thing? It might be this thing. I had a funny story, and it was about the name. So like you take this thing out, right? Ha! See? You take this thing out. It's gonna be called this thing. And someone's like, what the heck are you fishing? You go, oh, this thing? Or you catch a boat, you're gonna, because this is gonna slay it, trust me. This is gonna slay it. Smallmouth City, bring it on, boys. And so you're gonna be like, you're gonna catch a boatload of smallies on this, and your boat buddy's gonna be like, dude, what the heck are you catching all these fish on? You'd be like, this thing? You know what I mean? So the fly's called this thing because it's kind of like a thing fly. Like it's just weird mad scientist stuff going on. But the action. So the fly obviously rides on its side, right? It's, you know, it's kind of like a Kelly Gallup flatliner or like a Swimmy Jimmy. It's a stacked sideways bait fish, and it looks like a wounded fish that's floated on its side, dead in the water or wounded, and it obviously is buoyant, right? And has that Flashaboo, not Flashaboo, Flyman Fishing Company double barrel popper in it. So you cast this out, it lands on the surface. I fished it today with a floating line and a 6-weight. Casted like a dream. It sits up on the surface. First strip, because of that 26-degree bent jerk head, it pulls that under, and then you catch the concavity of the double barrel popper head in the slider position, and you get a diving fish, but it stays subsurface because of the mid-neutral buoyancy. And so you can basically walk a jerk, kind of like a horizontal jerk fly, kind of like a neutrally buoyant swim fly wedge head without any deer hair work on a floating line. And that's how it swims. It literally is a diver, a dive and wobble, little float, dive and wobble, little float. And it's just insane. So that is this thing. Check it out. It's so cool to fish this thing. It's I love that. This thing. It just like comes out in the sentence. So super fun to fish, super easy to tie. Check it out. Hope you like the tutorial. I'm gonna do some epoxy work here, and we'll be good to go. See you guys.